How to reduce your freight costs. That's the topic for this week, coming right up. So why are we talking about freight costs? Well, I've just been running a webinar on saving logistics costs generally, and there were quite a few questions about freight costs. We've got quite a lot on the channel about freight costs, but I thought it's worth emphasising and reminding you about 7 particular key areas that can help you reduce your freight costs, because we all struggle, I know, we're trying to keep freight costs down. Before I get into those, though, I just want to explode a couple of myths. And if you like, the inexperienced way to reduce freight costs is to go to your freight company, your freight carrier, whatever you call them in your part of the world, and say, hey, our costs are going up, we're paying whatever it might be, $30 a tonne, $80 a pallet. We need to reduce that. What can you do? Sharpen the pencil. It very rarely works, and I'll tell you why. Freight, and I'm not necessarily being biased here for freight companies, but it's a fact. Running a transport operation is not the quickest way to get rich. It's pretty low margin, particularly when you're handling commodity freight. Pretty low margin, ultra competitive, and most freight companies I know operate on very skinny margins. So just attacking the rate is not going to get you far. If they're desperate, they might give you a bit of a discount, but you've got to ask yourself, is that sustainable? How long, if it's too low, that worries me, because it's not sustainable. They're going to fall over. Recently in Australia here, we had a huge freight company go under. So just want to put it out there. Not great margins in the transport industry. If you want to try and reduce your transport costs, there's smart ways to do it. And that's what I want to try and talk to you about today. Ultimately, the bottom line is you've got to change the task. If you want a different cost outcome, change what you're asking the freight company to do. Doing it smarter, think about how you're presenting your freight to the carrier and so on. But let's run through the 7 that I've got for you. First of all, volume leveraging. What do I mean by that? A lot of companies will have different bits of the company buying freight from different freight companies and the same company, all at different rates. So let me put that into context. I've come across an industrial distributor where, let's say, they have 20 branches. Each of the branches are responsible for their own distribution operations, hiring their own freight carriers. Many of those branches are hiring the same carriers. Now, that's not particularly smart because it's duplication of administration effort, but it's also not very smart because they're paying different rates. So how does that come about? Well, it grows up over time through history. We like to use this transport company and we've got this rate for them, and then another branch kind of starts using the same company and they get a different rate structure. They're dealing with different salespeople, and it's kind of a bit dumb, isn't it? So what you've got to do is leverage your volume. Where you've got, say, a number of different branches, facilities, maybe even different divisions within a large business, start to look at the types of freight operations that you need support with, sort of services, and maybe you can start to kind of pool that, put all your eggs in fewer baskets so that you get some leverage and some discounts. Because quite simply, the more volume that you can shift with a particular carrier, they should be giving you better rates. It's giving them much better utilization of their fleet and so on. So look at volume leveraging to see if you can start getting some discounts. Number 2, look at the transport resources that are being used and make sure that they match the task. So, for example, it might be the size of vehicles. It could be, do you need metro vehicles that have got tail lifts for unloading? Do you need crane attachments which are going to help unloading rather than the destination point having to provide cranes or whatever it might be. Look at the fleet that is actually being used, size of vehicles, capacity and so on. Does it match your need? And when you're talking to a number of freight carriers, maybe you're going to the market to renew some freight contracts, have a look at things like that, because it's going to impact their rate to you and hence your cost. So do look at the resource and task match. Number 3, the rate structure. This is where people do make mistakes at times. So what do I mean by the rate structure? A couple of things. It could be a totally different type of rate. So for example, it could be a cost per tonne, a cost per pallet. It could be a full truckload rate, FTL rate as we call it here in Australia, or an LTL rate, less than truckload rate. So it could be a rate based on the capacity of the vehicle, in that you're paying for that vehicle for that trip, regardless of what's in it. It could be a unit cost. We're paying X per pallet, per cubic metre, per tonne, or whatever it is. So look at the rate structure and make sure that that makes sense for the sorts of products that you're sending. And I mean, you've got to make sure it's competitive, obviously, but you've got to make sure you're using the right rate structure and that you're getting the benefits of discounts. So let me explain that very briefly. If you look at the different weight breaks or volume breaks that carriers often give you, it might be 1 to 5 pallets will give you this cost per pallet, 5 to 10 pallets will give you this cost. And as the size of the consignment goes up, so you get a better unit rate for that consignment. Have a look, I'm kind of giving away the secrets here, but have a look at your consignment profiles over time. If the majority of your freight, for example, is single pallets, you want to make sure you have a really good single pallet rate. There's no point in having a great 10 pallet rate or a great full truckload rate if you're sending individual pallets. You want the individual pallet rate to be good. Likewise, if your average consignment is 10 pallets, you want to make sure that for that break you're actually getting a good rate. So a lot of people don't understand that. If you understand it, sorry for teaching you to suck eggs, but I come across so many people who don't. So that was number 3, the rate structure. Number 4, the service agreement. This is your agreement with your freight carriers. Have a look at specifically what service is being provided, how that's going to be measured, the performance metrics, the targets. Look particularly at any additional costs. You have things like fuel levies, there could be all sorts of other additional costs. Make sure that you're right across that and understand it all. And, are you getting the right sort of value in terms of the services being provided? Number 5, again, this catches people out, is the service type. So, for example, it could be, same day delivery, next day delivery. It could be a 2 or 3 day delivery where the freight company's taking it away to their hub. They're going to consolidate with other people's freight and then on deliver, that type of thing. Make sure you're buying the right level of service for your customers. So, for example, if all of your customers are happy for next day delivery, is there much point in paying for same day? It's going to be a lot more expensive. Conversely, if your customers all want next day delivery, then they're going to get a bit upset with you if it's later than that. So make sure that you match the service that you're buying with your customer service offer. And it may not be a single offer, of course. It could be for different types of customers, a different offer. Number 6, dedicated resources. For some businesses, this can make sense. So, for example, I've done some work recently in the steel industry. That delivery of structural steel requires vehicles of a particular size, capacity, weight and capacity. Some of them need to have cranes for dropping off the stuff at building sites. It can make a lot of sense for both the transport company and for you to have those vehicles on a dedicated basis. So by that I mean you're not paying per trip, per load, you're paying for that vehicle, for the week, for the month, and there's an agreed rate. If that makes sense for you, make sure that you're really utilising that fleet well. If you're not, maybe a dedicated fleet is not making a lot of sense for you. So in that scenario, if you're transporting structural steel, you want to make sure that you're using those vehicles in their full capacity, not just weight and volume capacity, but you want to make sure you're using the full shift. Can they actually be doing out second deliveries? Can you double shift them? Make sure that if they're dedicated to you, that you're getting the maximum use, the maximum utilisation out of those vehicles. And then finally, number 7, kind of linked with that, is to make sure that your capacity utilisation is well leveraged. So here generally we're talking about volume capacity. I have seen instances, particularly where there have been dedicated fleets and some rather peculiar rate structures where the vehicle really isn't being that well utilised. not, in terms of its capacity, and you're paying for that empty space. So it's a little bit like the resource and task mix. You want to make sure that the vehicles are appropriate for your distribution operation and that you're utilising that capacity well. So there we go, just a quick reminder of some of the ways that you can actually help reduce your freight costs. It is generally not go and beat up your freight provider and ask them to reduce the price. Just remember that, it's a pretty low margin business. It's about being smart with what you're asking for in terms of the service, making sure you've got the right rate structure. Sure, the rates have got to be competitive, but make sure you're buying the right service. That's really what it comes down to. Of course, if you need some help with your freight, we're more than happy to help you. I'll put a link down below, just reach out. But thank you for watching, and do have a look around on the channel. There's lots of other videos on freight and cost reduction opportunities as well. Bye for now.